Welcome to Redbeard Radio. I'm Brian Keith, and if you ask me who I am, the answer I give you is going to change depending on when you asked me that question. There was a time where I would say, I'm Brian Keith and I'm a sword fighter. And there's a time where I would say, I'm Brian Keith and I'm a mountain climber. Or I'm Brian Keith and I'm a speaker. And that context in which you ask me that question really changes who I am when I answer you. And so we have this idea of how we are related to what we're doing and how we're related to the body that we're in. If you ask me in my mid-20s, who are you? And I said, I'm a sword fighter. I was walking around in a sword fighter's body. If you asked me just after I got down from Mount Rainier for the second time, who are you? And I said, I'm a mountain climber. I told you that from a mountain climber's body. Today, we're going to dive in more to this idea of the narrative that you're telling yourself, how to find out what your narrative is, and how to change it to go become more of the person that you want to be. And joining us in this conversation is Alexander Juan Antonio Cortes. You might know him from one of his many books on how to change your body and get more fit. He's prolific on Twitter and one of the people famous for saying, who trained today, who lost fat today, and just challenging us on a daily basis to be more in tune with who we say we are. Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. That was a heck of an intro.
Well, one of the things I love to do here on Redbeard Radio is interview people who have done something 10,000 times and then say, what do you know about that? And when I think about how many people, over 20,000 people on your email list, a bazillion people following you on Twitter, a bazillion people have bought your ebooks, that you've helped people ask themselves, who do I want to be? And then you've told them, take action on who you say you are. And you've done that way more than 10,000 times. So diving into this topic with you, I'm pretty excited about because you've helped so many people really realign with who they say they want to be. When I think about that realignment, I think one of the most basic ways we can look at it is you tell a story to people about you don't have to have the body you're in now. You did what you did to get to the body you're in now, but you don't have to stay with it. And let's just start there with that narrative of if I'm like in my case, I can't do many pull-ups. And earlier this year, I worked really hard on pull-ups for a while. I got to where I could do 25 in a day, which for me was a huge deal, starting from 0 in a day. And then I didn't train them for a while, and now I can't do 25 in a day anymore. So let's start off with that, how we create our bodies through our narrative and how you help people really change that narrative.
That's a good starting point. The body will always tell a story. Yeah, this is something that if I was to go back in time, I go back to, let's say, when I'm an adolescent, like young boy, 7, 8, 9 years old, preteens. I was always very enthralled with the idea of superheroes. A very common thing, obviously, at that age for boys. And I was always very impressed with what they looked like. And I was an avid comic book reader at the time. And the impression you get from someone that's heroic, these heroic archetypes, it's actions, of course, it's characteristics, it's personality, and it's also a look. And it all ties itself together. You cannot separate mentality from physicality. They are very much ideally one the same. They're the same thing. And then as I got older, I knew that I wanted to work out. I wanted to lift weights, which I did. And I wanted to look heroic. I wanted to have the look of being heroic. At the same time, I want to live heroically. I want to live life on my own terms, my own way, in accordance with my sense of freedom. And when I started personal training, which was at this point, I'm 32 now, I was 21, so 11 years ago. When I started personal training, something you realize very swiftly is that training is not a physical job, it's a psychological one. And people's limitations that they have, they're not truly physical limitations, they're mental limitations. Everyone's body has a story, and most of what people think about themselves is self-limiting. So your self-limiting beliefs correspond with your self-limiting physical capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to get someone fit, we say I want to be healthy, I want to be in shape, we want to achieve some kind of better shape. What are we really talking about here? On one level, we're talking about physical qualities, of course, okay, I want more muscle, I want to be stronger, I'd like less body fat, but what's the story behind that? The story behind that is that you're changing your narrative of who you individually are yourself. You're changing what you think about yourself. You are going to need to call into question your beliefs. What do I think about me? And as you go through the process of training, and it is a personal experience. You go through the process of personal training. What you run into is not just, as I said, those physical obstacles, but you start realizing that your self-talk, your mindset,
Hmm.
your stories, whether they be limiting, whether they be empowering, your personal history, everything you've grown up with. At any given time, the body you are in is your entire life lived to that point. You are where you are right now because of how you lived, both mentally and physically, and spiritually, metaphysically, whichever way you want to slice it. So when people start going through this process, what typically surprises them is that physically it's hard, but mentally, that's where the struggle is. Give me that. Sorry, I got a kitten yesterday and it's discovered bells.
The kitten standing in for our ego and our love of new shiny things instead of doing the hard work we know we need to do to actually change ourselves to get the body that we say that we want.
Yes,
Or that's projection. One of those.
No, it's funny when animals is young, it has like that childlike attention span where everything is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you can readily relate that to people's personal struggles and journeys with fitness. A very large portion of that is their personal struggle with being unable to focus.
A friend called it exercise binging. And when he said
Yes.
that's what he did, and I immediately saw in myself, oh no, I exercise binge. And once you see it, there's no looking away from it. Like, oh man, what if you, only ate healthy food for a day or two, then you went back to eating crap? What kind of outcome would you expect? What if you only worked hard for a day or two and then you went back to sort of slacking as much as you could without getting fired? What result would you expect? But then I go and sometimes I'll do a bazillion pull-ups at a time where I just finished 75 hard, 75 days, no rest days, working out every day. And shockingly, I lost a pant size. I looked great. And then since 75 hard ended, how often, how hard have I worked out? Well, you already know the answer, which is not nearly as hard as I was working out when I was committed to an external narrative about, do you want to be able to say that you did this thing? Then you have to follow these rules. And then once I finished it, I said, I deserve a rest, Alexander. I deserve a rest. Which, yeah, I did. But how long is that rest?
That's a good question. That's one of the issues with external motivation. Not that it's a bad thing at all. Most of what motivates us, rightly so, is going to be external. There's going to be a social validation factor for it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the big dividing line between someone who is, let's say, like legitimately dedicated to the fit lifestyle, they are that person, or they don't slack off ever. What separates them from someone that's sporadic? Well, that's their identity. Their identity is that they are a person who does these things, and these are their habits. So, like they are within the practice of being themselves. Someone else where they want to model those characteristics, but they don't internalize them. Well, you don't internalize them. You might achieve that goal. And I know lots of guys have done 75 hard. 75 hard is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I know lots of people have done that, and it's changed their life. But that's also a common problem with these external challenges. It's like, I'm going to do this for 2.5 months, however long it is. You finish it. Oh, I accomplished something. But is this really who you've become, or is this something that you did for the sake of doing it to say that you did it? You'll have to make that decision for yourself.
You use this word model versus internalize, and I want to highlight that. It brings to mind a story of when I was doing search and rescue, and I was a casual search and rescue person. So I showed up, I trained some, I went on some missions, but there were some people part of the mountain rescue unit that was associated with the same group I was in. And those people were insane, where they were fit enough and skilled enough that they could be dropped off by helicopter on one mountain and told, okay, there's someone on one mountain range away, go keep them alive until the helicopter can show up. And if the helicopter doesn't show up, be ready to pack them out. Insane level of preparation and dedication. And one of those people, I heard her talk once about how when she had time off in the evenings from her day job, she would go and train more to get a little bit faster on the trails. And this is a person who is already a completely committed mountain rescuer. And in her spare time, she was training to get a little bit faster mountain rescue. And that's that internalized thing, whereas I looked at them and I said, that is so cool. I want to be that person. But then instead of putting in the years, putting in the reps of becoming in immaculate physical condition, I was more of a tourist. Now looking back now, at the time I thought I'm really committed. But looking back, I was not on the mountains every weekend. I was not out training on the trails on weeknights. The people who were, they're the people who will save your butt if you get caught out in the mountains in trouble. I wasn't actually committed. I was modeling their behavior and feeling good about myself because I want to be that. But it was like trying on a piece of clothing, right? I didn't actually do the work to earn that.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the imitation game that almost everybody plays.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, to model something is the path to becoming it, but that's not a straight path. You could mimic something, you could imitate behavior, and if that really is who you are, then that becomes what you do, and then you can't separate the two. But for a lot of people, like you said, we're sort of just trying things on. But fitness is one of those conundrums that you can play at fitness. You can, try to be fit. You can try to be dedicated, and then you cannot be it. You can ignore it, but then you're going to pay a cost for it. Which that's always the eternal internal struggle, for everyone. For everyone that's not fit, which is probably about 80-90% of people. Like, I know I need to do this. I know it's good for me. I know this should be part of my life, but I'm just not feeling it because, for so many reasons, whether it be mental, emotional, or physical, or just sheer laziness, trying to get yourself to the gym to work out. It's not something that you get to do. It's something that you have to do. It's an
Hmm.
obligation, and it's grindingly hard. And what do? You go in and out of it, you slack off, and then you probably maybe you find me on the internet at age 40, and you realize, like, what, I need to get my shit together and take this seriously, and then the process begins again, hopefully for the last time. Uh, which that's a very roundabout, circular story. But I mean, this is all stuff. Going back to circulate back to the beginning story, that when I first started training people, like I said, when I was 21, I realized that, wow, this is extremely psychological. This is people's identity that they're struggling with.
Hmm.
It's not just the exercise. The exercise is easy. You can write out a workout for somebody and go do this. It doesn't mean it's going to become part of them and become part of their destiny.
So, how do we change that narrative? You've worked with thousands of people who have successfully changed their self image and then continued the activity, and you've worked with thousands of people who didn't. What's the difference between those people?
The difference between people that change and people that don't, that's really the question we're asking. If you are going to change your future, you have to change what you think of yourself in the present, and you have to change how you think about your past. The past is always going to try to prove itself.
Hmm.
So, however you have acted up until this point, you are, probabilistically going to continue acting in that way. So we get into these, you could, like, these strange loops, these recursive loops, where because this is who I was yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that, day before that, that will be who I am tomorrow, and that goes on and on and on. If you're going to fundamentally change who you are, you have to legitimately visualize, think into the future, and consider, who do I want to become 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do I want to be capable of doing? You have to create this future picture in your mind, in your mind's eye, and it has to be concrete. It can't be something that you're just playing out, like, oh yeah, it'd be good to be a healthy and lose some fat. Like, no, it has to be defined. Why do I want this? What am I going to look like? What is my life going to be like when I hit this future state? Because now you're crafting a story. Now you're actually tapping into your subconscious and really considering who you are and where you are going, what your destiny is going to be. And then from that point, when you've established this sort of, I don't know, you could say sort of, it's not really even like it's not an idealized version of yourself. It's almost like this doppelganger version of yourself, where
Hmm.
it's the better version of you, 5-10 years from now. Once you've established that and you've actually really described that out, now what do? Well, now you work backwards in time to the present. And then everything you do now in the present is creating that future for yourself. So you're going backwards and forwards, through that eternal flow. And when you do that, now you actually have increased the probability, you've put the odds into your favor. Is what you find with people who are successful with their health. I mean, this goes from like the champion level all the way down to like the civilian level, you could say. People who are successful in changing themselves, they are just very basically very, very good at the visualization aspect. Yeah, and when I say it's not even, well, I'm underselling it. It's not really an aspect. They're very good at the power of visual change. Both in the mind and in the body and in the future. Like, they take that seriously. You can consider it a form of meditation. You could consider it transcendent. You could consider it manifestation if you want to. We're going to manifest this. Okay, how are we going to manifest it? We're going to think very, 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 very deeply on what we're doing and what's going to turn us into. like we're going to dedicate time, serious time to that. It's not just going to be a passing thought. It's going to be something that we, as I said, dive into the depths on.
I love giving concrete examples. So let me give an example, and we're going to walk through this
Yeah.
process, and you're going to add any additional Alexander flavor to how I need to be thinking about this. I have been on 2 mountain climbs up to the top of Mount Rainier, which is a 14,400 foot peak in Washington State, one of the tallest ones around in this area. It's nothing like the 14,000 or in Colorado where there's a bunch of them around. It's about 2 miles of vertical gain to get to the top. I did one as a climber on someone else's team. I led a rope team my second time, which was a medium level of responsibility. The top level of responsibility is you're leading the whole climb. And if I said, I want to be the kind of person who leads a mountain climb, then I got to back up to there and I got to say, well, who do I have to be physically? And then I need to get really specific. I already have the vision of being at the top of the mountain again and getting to look at the 8 people I've led up there. So I got that visual. I need to back up. Okay, what physical level? Well, there's the halfway mark to get up is called Camp Muir. And I know, because I've been doing this in this game for quite a while, if you can make it up to Camp Muir in 4 hours from the parking lot in moderate conditions, that means you're in pretty good shape. 5 hours means you're in okay shape. Over 5 means you're not really in shape. The people who are serious do it in under 4 hours. The people who are really serious do it in 3 hours and less, but that's professional guide level. So I could say, I'm going to be able to make it up to Camp Muir back-to-back days in under 4 hours in moderate conditions, which is to say not a blizzard, but it's okay if it's rainy and snowy.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can say, okay, if I need to go 2 days in a row to get up to Camp Muir, now I can look at what specifically do I need to do to get there and how can I test myself before I even show up to that parking lot for 2 days in a row to test myself. That's my very specific visualization for getting to, I want to lead a mountain climb up Mount Rainier. What can I add to that to go give myself a better chance of success?
So you described a lot of the external conditions of, like sort of the physical aspect of like, I need to be able to do this in X amount of time. What are the qualities of being a leader? Since we're talking about like, we're going to lead this expedition, who are the people you're responsible for? What
Yeah.
qualities are you actually role modeling for them? What are you going to say to them when they're on this, this journey? Since, it's
Well, that's
obviously,
great.
it's going to be very different from if you were just, if you were a follower of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the internal stuff. That's the subconscious. Those are the
Yeah.
personal
Well, I
qualities. Like,
immediately
all right, like,
think about, in order to be mentally prepared, I've led some mountain climbs before, but I need to go do in the same season as we're talking about. So not the year before, but the same season, I need to lead climbs on at least 2 more basic mountains where I'm responsible for everything. And so I have done that particular experience twice right before I do this, because that's where the confidence comes from. And that's where the exposing any problems in my systems, my technical rope skills, how I talk to climbers who are tired and emotional, anything. I need to expose those problems before the big climb because Mount Rainier is actually dangerous. Most other mountains around here are not nearly so dangerous as Mount Rainier. So I need to expose those. I need to do 2 climbs. And then in those, I will be developing the roped leaders, which is the medium level responsibility. They actually run each rope team. I need to develop who are those people going to be to help me do this mission, because I can't just lead 8 people, right? I have to have my 2 rope team leaders. So now you're going to be thinking about, well, who do I have to be to go have good relationships with the 2 people I need to do my Mount Rainier climb? And it's interesting how that opens up this whole interpersonal, where am I going to find these people? Will it be the same people I climbed with before? Will it be different people? Do I want to go on their climbs to be an assistant leader underneath them so we can develop a really good reciprocal relationship? It opens up a lot more questions than just my own physical fitness, which is interesting.
oh, it's a lot of questions. And then, with all those questions, let's roll all that out. If you are, you're the lead, instructor, your lead guide, what would you be doing right now today?
If I was serious about and we're recording this in October, the
Mm-hmm.
climbing season starts roughly April. If I was serious about leading a climb up Rainier in this next season, the first thing I would do is I would set a date. The date would probably be in June. I would set the 3-day climb window. And then I would go about scheduling probably 4 climbs before that day in order to both get my final certification from my climbing club. And I would also be wanting to be on a bunch of climbs where I would have assistant leaders so I could find out who I work well with. The last time I was leading mountain climbs was a couple of years back, and the assistant leaders I worked with then may or may not be as involved now in the club. So I need to go both reintroduce myself to the club as, hey, I'm serious, I'm doing this, here's what I'm doing, here's when I'm doing it. And then I would also, which I'm already signed up for this, but I'd be teaching in the climbing class to make sure that all of my physical skill sets, like rope skills, are exactly to the state of the art, what you ought to be doing. So that's the outward stuff. The inward stuff is I would be getting off my butt and more often going for a hike with I have a weighted backpack. It's just a 30-pound weight in this pack, but that's a really good approximation to just do that for maybe 3 miles, maybe 5 miles, 6 days a week with some elevation. That right there would be, and starting that now, 6 months before, or more like 8 months before the climb, that's enough time to take a generally in shape body and turn it into a mountaineering body at a basic level, like I would need for mountaineer. And just saying that out loud, it demands the question, why am I not doing this, right? All these things.
Yes.
If I care about it, if I'm modeling and not internalizing, then just talking about it, that's like, oh yeah, I want to go travel Italy. It's going to be fun. And then you find some hotels that'd be fun. You know, you take a look at a picture of a drink. That'd be fun to drink. And then go back to watching Netflix.
There's a term in training, in exercise science, actually. It's called periodization. And this is something that it's very rarely talked about with like general fitness because it's a little bit complex. But periodization basically means planning out training. It means you plan out training, and you plan out training according to the physical principles of the body, of adaptation to imposed demands. You plan out training in accordance with the adaptation curve for neurological coordination, the adaptation curve for muscle gain, the adaptation curve for cardiovascular adaptations. And if you really study fitness on a, let's say, like a more scientific, deeper level, as a professional, you realize that most effects that we desire with our body, whether it be fat loss or muscle gain or strength or some combination thereof, explosiveness, you can actually map out to quite a level of detail the rate of time that those effects will occur in, those results, if you want, let's call them results. You can map out with a great deal of certain, maybe not certainty, but accuracy, how those results will happen, the time frame to expect for them to happen. And you can do that in a 12-week time span, a 6-month, a 9-month, 12 months. You can do that over actually 4 or 5 years. At the highest levels of sports, it's like Olympics, athletes will sort of plan out training cycles in 1 to 2 to 3-year cycles even. Like their preparation will be multi-year. That's something that's done every day. And when I learned about periodization years ago, that's something that I've taken with me into sort of the world of personal development, that if you want to improve, in quotes yourself, you care about self-improvement, okay, you can actually plan out what you're doing to like this is the level of detail that we're talking about now. Okay, let's plan out the actual training schedule. Let's plan out the mental training schedule. Let's plan out all the people that need to participate in this outcome. You can plot all this out, and it's not a hard and fast plan. This isn't something that's going to be pages and pages and pages and pages, but it can be a page or two, certainly. It's a schedule to follow, and it gives you that proverbial roadmap towards that future goal, towards your future self. If you don't do this, your likelihood of success, not to say it's going to be zero, but it's going to be harder to succeed at something that you have not properly prepared for. If you have in fact planned for like what you're describing now to be the lead guide, okay, well now we've sort of detailed we've detailed what we need to do. We know the factors at play, and we'll probably find out more factors as we go along through the process. So then it just becomes, well, let's start. And like I said, periodization, when I discovered it, it made me realize that most of what people do in life, their attempts at bettering themselves, it's just throwing shit at a wall and hoping something sticks. If you're really serious about it, you're going to take the time to figure out that continuum before you embark on that journey.
But this all leads us to how committed are any of us to what we say we're committed to. I'm looking right now at the book, Training for the New Alpinism, which as I was thinking more about how I would train, I thought, oh, right, I have a book written by mountain climbers that talks exactly about what you're talking about, where they say, if you, they have a test that helps you understand where are you at on their scale of fitness. And then they say, if you're at this, if you're a 2 out of 5 fitness level, do these things on these days for this many months until you can get to this level on the scale. And now you can start your actual pre-climb training. So they get very specific. But then I think
Nice.
about, well, and this is by Steve House and Scott Johnson. For anyone who's into alpinism, Training for the New Alpinism, the best book. And the subtitle is A Manual for the Climber as Athlete. Utterly fantastic book. But here's the thing. I now have to look at, well, if I'm serious about all this and I want to go do the climb in June, what am I willing to not do to go do this? And doing this plan that we're talking about that says, here's a 1 or 2 page, here's what you're doing. Okay, so I'm actively choosing to not do other things. What am I not going to do? And in nutrition, it's pretty easy to say, well, I'm going to not eat donuts. I'm going to stop drinking soda. But we have to do the same thing with our time, right? And if I'm going to make the time, and this was with 75 hard, I was home much less in the evenings because an embarrassingly often time, I didn't get my workout done in the morning, had to do my workouts after work. And so I'd be, oh, it's 9 p.m. I'm going to go out for a hike, in the evening because I got to, because I'm committed to this thing, but not committed enough to do it earlier in the day. So I end up not getting time with my fiance at the time. So I guess my question for you, Alexander, is
Yes.
how do we manage our commitment level when there's so many things we want to do that sound good, but then we actually only have enough attention to drive a handful of initiatives forward?
This is the eternal question of how serious are you? I want to say it's Tim Grover. He was like Michael Jordan's personal trainer. He has a book, a legitimately good book about winning and victory, and he makes this very good point that when we think about success in anything, success is almost like its own force. It's like fortune or it's like luck. Victory is an experience that we arrive at, and for those who have been victorious, we know what it feels like. We've achieved something. We're filled with that sensation, that emotional state. It has a power that way, but it's fleeting. It's fleeting, and it requires a cost every single day if you want to keep it going. So you need to make not a make a choice. Is this the most important thing in my life that I'm going to say no to everything else to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in love with it, if it's something that you must have, or to not have it, you could not live without it, you'll make that choice. If you're not, then you're not. It's like a relationship that you're just not really feeling. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. So maybe we should break up. But we had a great time together, right? I don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
No, it's fantastic.
But
I'm thinking about my grandfather right now, who he worked at Boeing for 30 years, never missed a single day of work, no sick days. He had his work, he had his family,
wow.
and he had sailing. And if he was not at work and he was not with his family, he was sailing, period. And now, if the weather was bad, he was probably working on his boat because, of course, sailboats are always falling apart. But he didn't he didn't garden, he didn't go hiking, he didn't climb mountains, he sailed. And he was just completely committed. And I see with my mountain climbing buddies, people who took the basic class after I did. I'm thinking of one climber, Kimber Bell, who's a one-handed climber, born without a right hand. And she's now a celebrated ice climber where the companies make custom prosthetics so she can go climb waterfalls. She's incredible. And she's completely committed to climbing and fitness. And I think, wow, I admire the hell out of her. And I think at times I look at myself and I go, oh, if I was only a better person, I would be more committed. And then other times it's brought to my attention by my wife, among other people, that I'm actually building a business here. I'm an entrepreneur where a lot of these people I admire who are totally committed, they're employees in somewhere. Like Kimber is a
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten teacher. So yeah, in the summer, yeah, she's getting ready for school a little bit, but no, she's out there and that's what she is doing because she knows who she is. And who am I? I'm Redbeard. This is what I'm doing. And I also get to climb a little bit, sail a little bit, garden a little bit. But I'm not a gardener first and foremost. I am my business first and foremost. And so I try to be gentle on myself a little bit, though I'm also sort of bad at that because I see the people around me excelling from such focus, such discipline. And I think, why am I not as good as they are?
No, that's not who you are. I mean, this is not a moral choice. Very often people are hard on themselves because you try to morally arbitrate, what we choose to do. Of like, let's say fitness, for example, or something like what you're describing, which requires extreme dedication. Like, am I failing? Because I'm not doing this. Like I would say, you've created sort of your own structural failure in your head.
Mm.
You're already at failing. You are failing at something before you've ever really committed to it, even though it's not really who you are in the first place. There's nothing wrong to say no to something.
That sounds like we could unpack that sentence into a full-length book. Keep on going, Alexander. I'm listening.
There's nothing wrong to say no to something. We cannot be all things. This is one of the I'd say sort of the antagonisms, the tortures of people who are, let's say, like generally intelligent and good at multiple areas. Maybe not genius, but like you're autodidactic enough where it's like like full well that you could teach yourself to do lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
It could be physical, it could be mental. Obviously, most cases it's probably going to be both. Like you have the capacity to learn multiple skills, and then you see someone who's similar enough to yourself that you identify with them. It's like, wow, that person is so good at ...
Mm-hmm.
I could be so good at ...
Yep.
if I was more like them, like being what? If you were them? If I would say for those people who truly identify with a particular passion that way, that's their nature. They have found a thing that makes them who they are. And you can't negotiate with what your nature is. You can discover it, you can experiment with it, but you can't negotiate with it.
That it also needs to be a full-length book. You cannot negotiate with your nature.
You can't. If you woke up tomorrow and said, I'll just throw something out there. I don't know what your background is in music. Let's say like, I want to be an incredible guitar player. If that was truly your nature, you already would have been that thing.
Mm.
You would have started playing guitar 20 years ago. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't get competent at guitar. Maybe you take musical lessons and 5 years from now, you're going to be better than 90% of people because 90% of people have never taken lessons. But are you going to be top 100 in the world, world class? Probably not. But there's nothing wrong with not being world class at something. If that was your nature, you would already be that thing. So when we see people who are exceptionally good at areas that we are not, but we have some possibility of skill, rather than judge ourselves like, I failed because I'm not as good as that person. I'm not who they are. I could be though. It's not about can or can't. It's about who and who is not.
You're making me think that,
That's their nature.
the question is more, it's not about how can I become great at X. The question is more, how can I discover my nature? Which
Yes.
I've been working on that my whole life. For sword fighting, that was my nature for a decade of my life. I was so aligned, and I hung out with other people who were completely aligned. And even in that, I have a particular body type, and I was better at some things than other things. And I thankfully had a fantastic teacher and fantastic senior fighters around me to really help me understand, oh, don't do that. You're trying to play a game as if you're 20 pounds heavier. It's never going to work. Or do this over here because that's what your body type is right for. You need to learn this skill, use this tool. And they helped coach me understanding here with this body I have, which I can't change too much. Here's what I should go do.
Those are good teachers.
I was so blessed.
I mean, this is something that I've grappled with myself for a long time with my career, where I'm not passionate about fitness. Like despite making a career out of fitness, like I'm not passionate about fitness, but I do love to teach. And I realized a long time ago that regardless of whatever state my life is in, I always want to be teaching something. And fitness is personal enough to me because I've sort of built my own personal freedom around it, that it makes sense to continue on doing it. If you suddenly took this away from me, like it would bother me. Why? Because like, oh, I'm so in love with it. And like, it's not about love, and really it's not love at all. It's more of a torturous kind of compulsion. Like I have to be teaching, explaining something. I have to be getting better at this. And this, my girlfriend knows this. This drives me crazy all the time. Anyone that's known me professionally knows this, because I go through these periods of angst where I'm so damnably sick of just fitness everything, but at the same time, I have to keep studying it. I have to. It's obsessive.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely obsessive. And I'm always on the search for like new and better information, better teachers, better mentors. Like it never stops. I can never turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that's like at some point years ago, I'm like, this is kind of my nature. Like I'm always in the state of this wanting to continuously prepare and reach higher levels of physical preparation and teach that to people. And it's when people do it, it's incredibly gratifying. I see it. I'm like, God, yes, like you've done it. You've done something substantial, something real for yourself in what is very much an unreal and simulated world. Like you're no longer in the desert that way. But if you were to ask me, like, oh, like, do you love it? I'm like, I would never really use that word. Are you super passionate about it? I'm like, if passion is something that drives you crazy, sure, sure. Like, why not? Like, if that's your definition of passion. And then like I try to study lots of people in different fields, and people who excel in certain areas, who are let's say champion level or elite level, And I see something similar. Like it's if you want excellence in something, it's not even really about the enjoyment. It's just sort of about the difficulty in this getting there, and having to continuously break yourself down and try to reach a new level. Does that feel good? Not really. But does it make you feel something that you don't get from anything else? Absolutely. So this feels natural to you. It's something like, yes, you will keep doing this and do this forever, and you would never not do it. So I'd like to think that I found what I am natural at. And that's the question for, I think, like you said, for everybody. Like, can we find that thing, that brings that quality out of ourselves? And you don't find that unless you try different things. That's why, as I said earlier, like there's nothing wrong with trying something and failing. There's no point in judging yourself morally. If you attempt something that's not for you, then it's not you, and that's okay. Try something else.
I love it. We've covered at least 5 or 10 full-length book topics in this chat, and for folks who want to go read more about all the stuff you've created, all your courses on so many different topics, the place is cortes.site, cortes.site. And then Twitter, Alexander, is one of my favorite places to follow what you're talking about. And that's AJA_CORTES. Are there any other great places where people can follow your work?
I do. I post like photo essays a lot, in fact, on Instagram, which I think are pretty decent. Same as the Twitter handle, AJA_Cortes. But like those are the 3 places the best to find me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Twitter, I sort of consider like a super ego persona run amok. It's Twitter, like it's hyperbolic, and we're operating in the simulation, and I think people that assess my personality from that, they're always maybe a little bit surprised when they actually hear me speak, and they're like, oh, this guy's he's pretty calm, and he's he seems like he knows what he's talking about. And then the email list, the newsletter, I have my website. I have around like 35,000 subscribers, but the newsletters where actually will go into like extreme depth on various different topics, some of which are fitness related, a lot of which are more philosophical in nature. But like everything sort of we discussed here today, that's where I'll actually for this conversation, I'll probably like go back and reflect and like, let me actually write a 1,000 words or two about what I talked about, and hopefully there's something in here that can be extracted that's useful to the reader.
Yeah, I'm seeing on your email list here, recent emails from you include training for women, short on time but still want to get strong, neck training. If you're over 40 and you want to get fit, read this. So just a whole variety of just topics to bring people in and help them understand, for wherever they are, whoever they are, if they want to change this narrative that they're living in, you just keep on handing tools and breadcrumbs saying, hey, if you want to change, like you just did your guide to intermittent fasting, which I've heard some people just with incredible results from using that to really change their bodies. And now that I'm past 75 hard, which what I did for that was no sugar was my diet, no added sugar of any kind for 75 days. Incredible results. I mostly wanted to get healthier in general, didn't care about fat loss specifically, but I lost the pant size and really leaned out my body from just all the inflammation from sugar. And my next thing is really to start looking at fasting. So I went ahead and got your intermittent fasting guide, and I'm excited about really exploring that in a more serious way than I have in the past. Less of a casual way, more of a, okay, what's a 6-month or what's a 12-month investigation of this way of eating? What's that going to bring me? And really planning that out, like we're talking about, with planning out a program for that.
Oh, that's excellent. That guide, the free guide, actually, I think it's pretty useful. Like the approach I take to a lot of my work is, see, I don't pretend to be profound when I come up with fitness stuff. A lot of it's just sort of organizing disorganized knowledge. But I take something sort of like how would you call it? Like a sort of someone. I had a follower reference something mathematics, like I'm probably going to say it wrong, like combinatorics. I've never said that word out loud. I've only read it. But basically,
combinatorics, like elementary school, or schoolhouse rocks, or something like that.
Yeah, combinatorics. So basically, it's just a mathematical sort of like field philosophy where it's primarily concerned like with counting stuff properly, but you're counting for the sake of obtaining like an end result, and you're dealing with like finite properties and finite structures and finite factors. But he described my work that way, and when I went back and reviewed it, I'm like, oh, that's actually a very good description, since a lot of what I put together that are, the paid, like the fitness programs, these guides, they're not just workout programs. What I'm trying to do is take all the useful, applicable pieces of like fitness information that will have an actual positive effect, when you apply them. Whether it be within the workout, whether it be diet wise, whether it be, lifestyle, like what are things that actually work and where are the steps that those things require. And now that you know what those things are, and I've explained to you, like, this is how you execute on it, well, you should get the outcome that you want. And it's organized in a very easy to follow fashion, I think.
Well, it's getting rid of distractions. I'm looking at your Ancient Athletics book that I bought from you a while back, and you have chapter headings like physical, mental, and spiritual hygiene. So you're saying, okay, do this, and then don't do that over there. And sometimes, as a coach, just the stop doing this thing that's hurting you. That is what is required to make the space to get the thing you want, and you can't just shove the thing you want into unhealthy lifestyle. It's like, I'm going to go on a marathon and then keep on eating a dozen donuts a day. It doesn't matter that you ran the marathon. No one cares. You're still going to be really sick from eating all those donuts.
Yes, that guide was actually really enjoyable to write. I researched it last year during like the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I was in Thailand when I was researching it, but that term, like, mental, physical, spiritual hygiene, I got that from ancient Greek medicine, where this does not translate perfectly into English, but there's a certain phrase that, I don't speak ancient Greek, so I couldn't tell you what it was, but there was a phrasing that was used in a lot of what I was researching, where the ancient Greek model of medicine, it did refer to a kind of like literal like lifestyle hygiene, where if you're being treated by a doctor, this is like an ancient doctor, and especially like the Hippocratic school, you're someone like the Roman physician Galen, who was the most famous doctor after Hippocrates. They would go and they talk to you and they'd interview you and they'd be like, all right, what are you suffering from right now? Like, why? What's your overall lifestyle situation? And there's this apocryphal story supposedly that Hippocrates would ask his patients, like, are you willing to give up what's bothering you before I give you any kind of recommendation for treatment? Are you willing to give it up? A lot of what exists actually today as Stoicism comes from ancient Greek medicine, where when they were treating people with melancholia, like basically depression or laziness or anxiety, there would be these mental principles of like, okay, like what you're describing to me, and you're willing to give this up, I need you to start being disciplined. So you need to start doing this every day, waking up at the same time. You need to stop thinking about these things and focus on this. And I mean, and today, like in psychology, this is, in talk therapy and in cognitive behavioral therapy, this would be something that would be talked out over multiple sessions, and you really try to drive into the person's motivation. And I mean, there's so many different ways you can slice psychology. But I found it really fascinating that in that era and time, psychology didn't exist as a field. Your physical and mental health were more or less considered the same thing. Like they were legitimately believed to be the exact same thing. So there's no point in separating them in the first place. So the recommendations, they're very prescriptive, but they're very practical. They're incredibly practical. They're step by step. Here's what to do. Here's what's not to do. And like there were health clinics that existed then. And this is like 2,500 years ago. You're suffering from depression, anxiety, laziness. You're whatever. You're afflicted by something that's taking you out of sorts. All right, you're going to go here. You're going to be here for a week. You're going to be out in the sun every day in the morning. You're going to sleep in these chambers. You're going to have these dreams. You're going to talk to this priest. You're going to eat this diet, and you're going to do these exercises. And after a week at this place, you're going to come out, and hopefully you are feeling a lot better because you did all the right things. It was quite incredible to research, since this was just, something that I didn't know this existed at all. I didn't know the ancient Greeks had this level of medicine. This is over 2,000 years ago, but they did. And there's actually pretty good historical records. There's historical records on how to set bones and deal with sports injuries. Same thing. I didn't know that it existed until I really researched it. So I spent all this time doing this scholarship, and when I put up together an ancient, sort of ancient athletics guide, I'm like, this is. I try to do the same thing. I'm like, let me make this as applicable and practical as possible. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds of like the philosophy of like their philosophies of why they did what they did. Since a lot of it did work. It worked really well. That guide was a lot of fun. I mean, it gave me a perspective too on modern medicine, since we've definitely, or mainstream medicine has very much strayed away from that practical outcomes method of treating people's lifestyle and then seeing a concrete result. Allopathic medicine just doesn't work that way at all.
Yeah. That's a different podcast episode about.
Yeah, whole different topic, but
Well, Alexander, thank you so much for being on the show. And folks, AJA_CORTES on Twitter, on Instagram, and CORTES.SITE to go get all of Alexander's books and courses. Thanks for being on the show, Alexander.
thanks, Brian. That was a great conversation.